Welcome to Night Echoes. Tonight, we're walking through empty school hallways, abandoned office buildings, and forgotten facilities where janitors work alone in the dark, discovering that some cleaning never ends, and some messes can never be cleaned up. These are 5 disturbing true janitor horror stories that will make you think twice about those who work while the world sleeps. Story 1. The Basement Custodian. My name is Marcus, and for 15 years, I worked as a night custodian at Riverside Elementary School in Pennsylvania. I'm telling this story because I can't keep quiet anymore. Not after what I discovered in the basement storage room that final night. What I found down there changed everything I thought I knew about the building and the man who cleaned it before me. Riverside Elementary was built in 1962. A typical red brick structure with long corridors, high ceilings, and that institutional smell of floor wax and disinfectant that never quite goes away. The building had character, you might say old radiators that clanged through the winter, wooden floors that creaked in specific patterns, and a basement that always felt colder than the rest of the building. Even in summer, when I started working there in 2008, the principal, Mrs. Henderson, gave me a thorough walkthrough of my responsibilities. Clean the classrooms, empty the trash, mop the floors, lock up by 6 a.m., standard custodial work, nothing I hadn't done before at other schools. But there was one area she specifically mentioned as off-limits, the old storage room in the basement's northeast corner. That room has been sealed for safety reasons, she explained, showing me the heavy padlock and chain securing the door. Asbestos concerns. The district keeps meaning to have it properly remediated, but you know how these things go. Budget constraints. She handed me my keys, a heavy ring with access to every door in the building except that one. Just leave that area alone and you'll do fine here. I did exactly that for 15 years. Every night, I'd clean my way through the building systematically, starting on the 3rd floor and working down. The basement was always my last stop, where I'd empty the boiler room trash and check the main electrical panels. I'd pass that locked storage room dozens of times each month, and I never gave it much thought. It was just another off-limits area in an old building full of bureaucratic restrictions, but things started changing about 3 months ago. Small things at first, the kind of details you might dismiss as imagination if you weren't paying attention. I'd finish cleaning a classroom on the 2nd floor, lock the door behind me, and return an hour later to find the trash can empty when I was certain I hadn't emptied it yet. Or I'd mop a hallway until it gleamed, only to discover fresh muddy footprints the next morning. As if someone had walked through after me with dirty work boots. The night janitor before me had been a man named Harold Brennan, who'd worked at Riverside for 32 years before retiring in 2008. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned him during my orientation, describing him as dedicated and thorough, someone who took real pride in keeping the school spotless. Harold knew every inch of this building, she'd said. Never missed a day, never left a job half-finished. We were sorry to see him go. I started noticing more irregularities as the weeks passed. Supplies I'd left in specific locations would be moved or reorganized. My cleaning cart would be repositioned between floors, always arranged more efficiently than I'd left it. The strange thing was, these changes were improvements. Whoever was making them understood custodial work better than I did. One night in late September, I was cleaning the 3rd floor science lab when I heard the unmistakable sound of a floor buffer running somewhere below me. The deep, rhythmic hum of the machine's motor echoed through the building's ventilation system, clearly audible even through the closed classroom door. I stopped what I was doing and listened carefully. The sound was coming from the 1st floor, near the main entrance. I'd left my floor buffer in the basement storage area, where I always kept it. I was certain of this because I'd specifically noted its location before heading upstairs. But someone was definitely running a buffer on the 1st floor, and they were doing professional work. I could hear the systematic pattern of overlapping passes. The way the pitch changed when the operator turned corners or worked around obstacles. I finished the science lab quickly and headed downstairs to investigate. The sound grew louder as I descended, that familiar industrial hum that every custodian recognizes immediately. But when I reached the first floor, the hallway was empty and silent. The floor had been freshly buffed though, gleaming under the overhead lights with that perfect sheen that comes from expert technique. I checked the basement storage area. My floor buffer was exactly where I'd left it, unplugged and cold to the touch. There was no other buffing equipment in the building. Yet someone had clearly done professional floor work on the first floor while I was upstairs. Things escalated from there. I'd arrive each night to find portions of my work already completed, always done to standards higher than my own. Floors mopped with perfect technique, windows cleaned to absolute clarity. Even complex maintenance tasks I'd been putting off, like replacing burned-out bulbs and hard-to-reach fixtures. Someone with extensive custodial experience was working the building during my shift. Someone who understood Riverside Elementary's specific needs and quirks. I started paying closer attention to the locked storage room. I'd always heard odd sounds from that direction during my basement rounds, sounds I'd dismissed as settling building noises or the heating system. But now I recognized them for what they were, the sounds of someone working. Moving supplies, opening and closing containers, the systematic activities of a custodian organizing his equipment. Last Thursday night, I decided I'd had enough of the mystery. I waited until my usual basement rounds, then positioned myself quietly near the sealed storage room door. I didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, I could hear clear activity inside. Someone was moving around, handling tools, opening what sounded like chemical containers. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. Footsteps, deliberate and familiar. The sound of someone who knew exactly where everything was located, moving through the space with practiced efficiency. I could hear liquid being poured, the distinctive sound of cleaning solutions being mixed. Someone was preparing for serious custodial work. Following protocols I recognized from my own experience, I tried calling out. "Hello, is someone in there?" The activity stopped immediately. Complete silence for several seconds, then the unmistakable sound of someone setting down containers and moving toward the door from the inside. A voice answered, muffled by the door but clearly audible. An older man, speaking with the kind of authority that comes from decades of experience. "Marcus, that you, son?" The voice knew my name. I'd never heard it before, but something about the tone felt familiar, like hearing a family member you'd never met but somehow recognized. "Who's in there?" I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. "Harold Brennan," came the reply. "Been meaning to introduce myself properly. Been watching your work these past few months. You're doing fine, son, but you could use some guidance. This old building's got specific needs." I stood there staring at that locked door, trying to process what I was hearing. Harold Brennan had retired 15 years ago. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned he'd moved to Florida to live with his daughter. Yet here was someone claiming to be Harold, clearly working from inside a room that had been sealed since before I started at Riverside. "Harold Brennan retired years ago," I said, though my voice came out weaker than I'd intended. "Retired from the payroll," Harold's voice replied with what sounded like amusement. "Never retired from the work. This building's been my responsibility for 32 years. Can't just abandon that because of paperwork and pension plans." I asked the obvious question. "How are you getting in there?" "That door's been chained shut for 15 years. Same way I've always gotten around this building," Harold said. "Through the steam tunnels. Built in 1962, same as the school. Connect to the old coal delivery system in the basement. Most people don't even know they exist anymore. Steam tunnels. I'd worked at Riverside for 15 years and never known about underground tunnels. But it made sense for a building of that era. Many institutions built in the 60s had extensive utility tunnel systems for maintenance access. I've been helping with your work, Harold continued. Hope you don't mind the assistance. Old habits. When I see a job that needs doing, I do it. Been that way since 1976. Since 1976? I asked. But you started here in 1976. That's when you were hired. That's when I died here, Harold corrected gently. Heart attack in this very storage room. Found me 3 days later when the heating contractor came to check the boiler. But the work needed to continue. Building full of children needs proper care. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You died in 1976? February 12th, just past midnight. Was mixing floor stripper for the gymnasium when my heart gave out. Fell right here among the cleaning supplies. There was a pause. District hired a replacement the next week, but I stayed on. Couldn't leave the building unprotected. The mathematics were impossible. If Harold had died in 1976, he couldn't have worked at Riverside until 2008, yet. Mrs. Henderson had clearly described a retiring custodian named Harold Brennan who'd been at the school for 3 decades. Mrs. Henderson said you retired in 2008. I said. Mrs. Henderson saw what she expected to see, Harold replied. People notice the work getting done. They assume someone's doing it. Easier than asking uncomfortable questions about locked storage rooms and impossible schedules. I stood there in that basement hallway, trying to understand what I was being told. If Harold had died in 1976, who had been the retiring custodian in 2008? Who had Mrs. Henderson been describing during my orientation? You want to see the proof? Harold asked, as if reading my thoughts. Check the district personnel records. Look up Harold Brennan's employment history. Real careful like. I made that call the next morning. The district's human resources department was surprisingly helpful, probably because I was a current employee with legitimate reason to ask about building history. They pulled Harold Brennan's file while I waited on hold. The records were confusing at first. Harold Brennan had been hired as night custodian at Riverside Elementary in January 1976. His employment had ended on February 12, 1976. Marked as deceased on duty. No mention of retirement. No record of him working until 2008. According to the official files, Harold Brennan had worked at Riverside for exactly 26 days before, dying of a heart attack in the basement. Storage room, but who had been cleaning Riverside Elementary from 1976 to 2008? Who had Mrs. Henderson been referring to during my orientation? I asked the HR representative to check the custodial records for that entire period. That's odd, she said after several minutes of searching. We don't show any official custodian assigned to Riverside Elementary from 1976 to 2008. The building was listed as self-maintaining during that period, though I'm not sure what that designation means. Self-maintaining. For 32 years, Riverside Elementary had been officially listed as self-maintaining, yet teachers and students had attended classes in a consistently clean, well-maintained building. Someone had been doing the work, but according to district records, no one had been assigned or paid for that work. I returned to Riverside that night with new understanding. Harold had been working the building alone for 32 years, continuing his custodial duties despite being dead. The retiring custodian, Mrs. Henderson remembered, had been Harold's ghost. So consistent and professional in his work that no one questioned his presence. I approached the storage room door with different intentions. Instead of demanding explanations, I simply said, Harold, I checked those records. I understand now. Good man, Harold's voice replied. Figured you'd want to verify things. Always important to check your facts in this line of work. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, You've been working here alone for 32 years. Why reveal yourself?" "Because I'm tired, son," Harold said, and for the first time, his voice carried the weight of decades. 32 years of night shifts. 32 years of maintaining this building alone. I was hoping maybe it was time to train a replacement. The offer hung in the air between us. Harold was asking if I wanted to continue his work, to take over the real custodial responsibilities at Riverside Elementary. Not just the official duties I was paid for, but the deeper maintenance that kept an old building truly functional. What would that mean? I asked. "Means learning the building's real needs," Harold explained. "The steam tunnels, the hidden maintenance areas, the problems that don't appear on any official work orders. Means doing the job right, whether you're alive or dead." I thought about my 15 years at Riverside, all the small mysteries and unexplained improvements I'd noticed. Harold had been watching my work, evaluating my commitment, deciding whether I was worthy of his trust. "I'm interested," I said. The lock on the storage room door clicked open from the inside. The chain fell away, hitting the concrete floor with a metallic sound that echoed through the basement. The door swung open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. "Come on in, son," Harold's voice said from somewhere in that darkness. "Time you learned how this building really works." I stepped through the doorway into the storage room, and everything changed. The space was larger than should have been possible, extending far beyond the building's foundation. Shelves lined the walls, filled with custodial supplies that gleamed like new despite being decades old. Workbenches held tools I'd never seen before, specialized equipment for maintaining an institutional building. And there was Harold Brennan, exactly as Mrs. Henderson had described him. An older man with gray hair and work clothes, organizing cleaning supplies with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing the job for 32 years. He looked solid, real, completely alive. "Welcome to the real maintenance department," Harold said, offering me a firm handshake. "Been running this place since 1976. About time I had some help." That was 3 weeks ago. I've been learning Harold's methods, understanding the building's true needs. The steam tunnels connect to maintenance areas throughout Riverside Elementary, spaces that don't appear on any architectural plans. Harold has been caring for the building from these hidden areas, ensuring that children have a safe, clean environment for their education. I still perform my official duties, the work I'm paid for. But my real responsibilities begin after that. When I join Harold in the storage room and we begin the true maintenance work that keeps Riverside Elementary running, that Mrs. Henderson has started commenting on improvements in the building's condition. Fewer maintenance requests, better air quality, systems running more efficiently than they have in years. She attributes it to my growing experience and dedication. She's not wrong. I am more dedicated now. I understand what it means to truly care for a building, to make it your life's work regardless of circumstances. Harold has been an excellent teacher, patient and thorough in sharing knowledge accumulated over decades of service. Last week, Harold mentioned he might be ready to retire soon. Really retire this time, now that he's confident the building will be properly maintained. I asked him what that would mean for me. "Means the building becomes your responsibility," he said. "Means taking care of Riverside Elementary for as long as it needs you. Whether that's 10 years or 30 years or longer. And if I die here like you did?" Harold smiled. "Then you keep working. Building full of children needs proper care. That's more important than being alive or dead. I'm writing this story because I want people to understand what real dedication looks like." Harold Brennan has spent 47 years caring for Riverside Elementary, 32 of those years after his death. He stayed because the work was important, because children deserved a safe, clean environment for their education. I'm proud to be learning from him. When Harold finally retires, I'll continue his work. Whether I'm alive or dead, Riverside Elementary will be properly maintained. That's a promise. Some jobs are more than just employment. Some jobs become a calling that transcends life itself. Harold taught me that dedication to important work doesn't end when your paycheck stops, or even when your heart stops beating. The children of Riverside Elementary will always have clean classrooms, safe hallways, and well-maintained facilities. Harold made sure of that for 47 years, and I'll make sure of it for as long as the building needs me. That's what real custodial work means. Taking care of what matters, no matter what. Story 2. The night cleanery worked as a night cleaner at Mercy General Hospital for 8 years. And in that time, I thought I'd seen everything the medical world could throw at someone in my position. Blood, bodily fluids, the aftermath of traumatic surgeries, rooms where people had passed away during the night shift. It's heavy work, both physically and emotionally, but someone has to do it. Someone has to maintain the sterile environment that keeps patients safe and gives families hope. What I discovered on the 4th floor of the East Wing changed my understanding of what clean really means. Some stains can't be removed with bleach, and some messes can't be mopped away. No matter how hard you scrub. My name is Rosa Martinez, and I'm telling this story because I need people to understand what happened in room 423. The hospital administration has sealed that room indefinitely, claiming structural issues, but I know the real reason. What I found in there proves that some places hold on to death so tightly that cleaning becomes impossible. Mercy General is a 400-bed facility that's been serving our community since 1954. The East Wing was added in 1987 to handle the growing demand for cardiac and neurological care. The 4th floor houses the most critical patients, people fighting for their lives with the help of advanced medical technology. It's always been the most challenging area to clean, not because of the physical demands, but because of the emotional weight that hangs in those halls. I started working the night shift in 2015, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., responsible for cleaning 12 rooms on the 4th floor. The work was methodical. Strip beds, sanitize surfaces, mop floors with hospital-grade disinfectant, restock supplies. Each room had to meet strict cleanliness standards because any contamination could be fatal to patients with compromised immune systems. Room 423 was always the most difficult. Not because it was dirtier than the others, but because it never seemed to get clean no matter how thoroughly I worked. I'd spend an hour sanitizing every surface, following protocols to the letter, and return the next night to find the room somehow grimy again. Not obviously dirty, but wrong somehow. Like the cleanliness wouldn't stick. The room had a history, though I didn't learn the details until later. Between 2018 and 2022, 7 patients had died in room 423, an unusually high number for a single room. Not from medical malpractice or negligence, but from complications that seemed to arise suddenly and without warning. Infections that appeared overnight, vital signs that crashed for no apparent reason. Medical equipment that mysteriously malfunctioned at critical moments. The nursing staff started calling it the unlucky room. They'd request patient transfers whenever possible, though they never explained their reluctance in official reports. The room spent increasing amounts of time empty, not because of maintenance issues, but because nobody wanted to assign patients there. Noticed changes in my cleaning supplies when working room 423. Fresh disinfectant would turn cloudy after a few minutes of contact with surfaces. Mop water would develop a strange odor, like copper pennies mixed with something organic and unpleasant. Cleaning cloths would become stained with substances that weren't visible before. I started wiping. The worst part was the feeling that I wasn't alone in that room. I'd be sanitizing the bathroom or changing bed linens, and I'd sense movement in my peripheral vision. Never direct enough to see clearly. Just the suggestion of someone moving around the space, checking on equipment, adjusting things I'd just finished cleaning. One night in March, I was mopping the floor in room 423 when I heard the heart monitor beep. A single clear tone that echoed through the empty room. I looked up at the monitor screen, but it was dark, unplugged from any power source. The equipment had been disconnected for weekly maintenance, yet I distinctly heard that familiar beeping sound. I finished the floor and started wiping down the monitor itself. As my cloth made contact with the screen, it flickered to life briefly, displaying a heart rhythm for maybe 3 seconds before going dark again. A normal rhythm, steady and strong, as if someone with a healthy heart was connected to the system. That's when I started paying attention to the equipment. In room 423, monitors that would activate themselves briefly when I cleaned them. 4 pumps that would cycle through their startup sequence without being turned on. Ventilator alarms that would sound for a few seconds before stopping. It was as if the room's medical equipment remembered the patients it had served and continued trying to care for them. I mentioned these incidents to Dr. Patricia Webb, the night supervisor who'd been at Mercy General for 15 years. She listened with the kind of careful attention that suggested she'd heard similar reports before. "Rosa," she said, "how long have you been cleaning room 423? 8 years since I started here. Why? Have you noticed patterns in the irregularities?" It was an interesting question. I thought about the months of strange incidents, trying to identify patterns in the chaos. The equipment activations always happened while I was cleaning, never when the room was empty. The medical devices seemed to respond to my presence, as if they were trying to communicate something important. "It's like the room expects patience," I said. "Like it's trying to provide medical care to people who aren't there." Dr. Webb nodded slowly. "Room 423 has been unusual for several years. We've had 7 unexpected deaths in that room since 2018, all involving patients who should have recovered normally. Unexpected how? Sudden cardiac arrests in patients with stable hearts, respiratory failures in people with healthy lungs, infections that appeared overnight in patients on powerful antibiotics." Dr. Webb paused. "The strange thing is, the medical equipment often detected these problems before they were clinically apparent. Monitors would alarm for abnormalities that weren't visible on manual examination." She pulled out a tablet and showed me medical records from room 423's recent patients. The documentation painted a disturbing picture. In each case, the room's monitoring equipment had detected fatal problems hours before the medical staff could confirm them through traditional means. Heart monitors showing arrhythmias that wouldn't appear on EKGs until later. Pulse oximeters detecting oxygen saturation drops that wouldn't be visible in blood tests for hours. "It's as if the equipment was predicting medical crises," Dr. Webb explained. "But medical equipment doesn't predict anything. It only measures what's currently happening. Unless, I thought, the equipment was measuring things that had already happened in that room. Unless the monitors were detecting the medical conditions of previous patients, overlaying their data onto current readings." "Dr. Webb," I said, "what if the equipment isn't predicting problems? What if it's remembering them?" She stared at me for several seconds. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if room 423's medical equipment has somehow recorded the deaths of those 7 patients? What if it's trying to replay those medical crises, warning about problems that have already happened?" It was a ridiculous theory, medically impossible and completely unscientific, but it explained the patterns I'd been observing during my cleaning rounds. The room's equipment wasn't malfunctioning. It was functioning perfectly, just for the wrong patients. "That's not how medical equipment works," Dr. Webb said. But her tone suggested she was considering the possibility. "Then how do you explain monitors activating when I clean them? 4 pumps cycling without power. Equipment that consistently detects problems hours before they're clinically apparent." Dr. Webb closed the tablet. "I can't explain it. That's why room 423 has been flagged for review by the hospital's technical services department. They're going to replace all the medical equipment next month. See if that resolves the irregularities. They replaced the equipment on a Tuesday in April. All of it. Monitors. 4 pumps, ventilator, defibrillator, even the patient bed itself. Everything in room 423 was removed and replaced with brand new devices. State-of-the-art medical technology with no history of service at Mercy General. Asterisk, I was curious to see if the new equipment would behave differently during my cleaning rounds. The answer came that very night. I entered room 423 with fresh cleaning supplies, ready to sanitize the new equipment according to updated protocols. The room felt different somehow, lighter, as if the weight of accumulated medical history had been lifted along with the old devices. I started with the patient bed, wiping down the rails and controls with hospital-grade disinfectant. The bed responded normally, no unexpected activations or strange behaviors. Same with the new heart monitor, 4-pump, and ventilator. Just standard medical equipment behaving exactly as designed. I was starting to think the problem had been solved when I moved to clean the room's main electrical outlet, the central power source that fed all the medical equipment. As my cleaning cloth made contact with the outlet cover, every piece of equipment in the room activated simultaneously, not just powered on, but fully operational. Heart monitor displaying a rapid, irregular rhythm. 4 pumps cycling at maximum rate. Ventilator breathing for an invisible patient at 28 breaths per minute. Defibrillator charging to 200 joules. All the equipment working together to provide intensive medical care to an empty room. The readings were specific and consistent. Heart rate, 156 beats per minute. Irregular rhythm suggesting atrial fibrillation. Blood pressure, 68/40ths, indicating severe hypotension. Oxygen saturation, 78%, dangerously low. Respiratory rate, 28, shallow and rapid. All the vital signs of someone in critical medical distress. I stood frozen in that room, watching brand new medical equipment provide intensive care to a patient I couldn't see. The monitors displayed clear, detailed information about someone's failing health. Someone who wasn't physically present, but was somehow still connected to room 423's electrical system. After 3 minutes, the equipment began shutting down in sequence. First the ventilator, then the 4-pump, then the defibrillator. The heart monitor was last, displaying a flat line for several seconds before going dark. The universal symbol for death, shown on equipment that had never been connected to a patient. I finished cleaning as quickly as possible and left room 423. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd witnessed someone's death. Not a recent death, but an echo of previous deaths. Somehow recorded in the room's electrical system and replayed through whatever medical equipment was connected to it. The next morning, I researched the 7 patients who had died in room 423 between 2018 and 2022. Public obituaries provided limited information, but I was able to find details about their final medical conditions. What I discovered made my hands shake as I read. Patient number 3 died September 2019. Final vital signs included heart rate of 156, blood pressure 68/40ths, oxygen saturation 78%. Patient number 5 died January 2021. Terminal cardiac rhythm was atrial fibrillation at 156 beats per minute. Patient number 7 died August 2022. Cause of death listed as respiratory failure with final breathing. Rate of 28 per minute. The vital signs I'd seen on the new equipment weren't random numbers. They were the exact final measurements recorded for patients who had died in room 423. Somehow, the room's electrical system had stored that information and was replaying it through whatever medical equipment was connected to the power supply. I brought this information to Dr. Webb, showing her the correlation between the equipment readings and the historical death records. She studied the data for a long time before speaking. Rosa, what you're suggesting is that room 423's electrical system has somehow recorded and stored the final vital signs of 7 patients who died. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. That's medically impossible. Electrical systems don't store biological data. Then how do you explain the equipment displaying those exact vital signs? Dr. Webb had no answer. Neither did the hospital's technical services department when they investigated the following week. They tested every piece of equipment, every electrical connection, every data cable in room 423. Everything tested normal. The equipment was functioning perfectly, according to specifications, but the incidents continued. Every time I cleaned room 423, touching the electrical outlets or power connections would trigger the medical equipment to display those same vital signs. Always the same readings, always in the same sequence, always ending with the flat line that signified death. The hospital administration made the decision made to permanently close room 423. Officially, they cited electrical irregularities requiring extensive renovation. Unofficially, they acknowledged that something inexplicable was happening in that room, something that posed a risk to patient care. The room has been empty for 6 months now, but I still clean it as part of my regular rounds. The medical equipment has been removed, but the electrical outlets remain active. Sometimes late at night when the hospital is quiet, I can hear the faint beeping of a heart monitor coming from room 423. I've checked multiple times. There's no equipment in that room, no source for the beeping sounds. But the rhythm is always the same, 156 beats per minute. Irregular, the sound of a heart in critical distress. Last week, maintenance installed new electrical outlets throughout the East Wing, including room 423, modern outlets with digital monitoring capabilities, designed to prevent power fluctuations that might affect sensitive medical equipment. The installation required rewiring the entire room, removing every trace of the original electrical system. I was curious to see if the new electrical infrastructure would behave differently. The answer came during my first cleaning round after the installation. As I wiped down the new outlets, the digital displays lit up, showing power consumption readings. But instead of normal electrical data, the display showed medical information: heart rate 156, blood pressure 68/40, oxygen saturation 78%. The same vital signs that had been recorded by the medical equipment, now appearing on electrical monitoring devices. Room 423 has recorded 7 deaths in its electrical system, and no amount of equipment replacement or rewiring can erase that data. The room remembers every patient who died there, storing their final moments in whatever electronic system is connected to its power supply. I still clean that room every night, though it remains officially closed. Someone has to maintain the space, even if it can't be used for patients. As I work, I can feel the presence of those 7 people who died there, still connected to room 423 through the electrical echoes of their final moments. The hospital will probably demolish the entire East Wing eventually, claiming structural issues or renovation needs. But I don't think that will solve the problem. Some places hold on to death so tightly that even destruction can't break the connection. Room 423 taught me that medical facilities don't just treat patients. They absorb them. The electrical systems that power life-saving equipment also record the moments when that equipment fails, storing the final data of every person who dies while connected to the hospital's power grid. I'm telling this story because people need to understand that some cleaning can't be done with disinfectant and mop water. Some messes are written into the building's electrical memory, playing back endlessly for anyone who knows how to look. Every night, as I clean that empty room, I listen to the faint beeping of hearts that stopped beating years ago, Still monitored by a hospital that remembers everything. Story 2, image prompt. Dark hospital room at night. Glowing medical equipment displays showing vital signs. Empty patient bed with monitoring devices, sterile institutional lighting. Female janitor in scrubs looking at electronic readings, ethereal medical atmosphere. Story 3, the office of my NTA. My name is David Chun, and I work night maintenance at Pinnacle Financial Tower, a 42-story office building in downtown Seattle. For 3 years, I've been responsible for cleaning floors 35 through 42, the executive levels where the company's senior management works during the day. It's quiet work, well paid, and usually uneventful. You clean empty offices, restock supplies, and maintain the pristine environment that executives expect when they arrive each morning. What I discovered on the 38th floor changed my understanding of what happens in office buildings after everyone goes home. Some employees never really leave, and some work projects continue indefinitely. Regardless of business hours or mortality, Pinnacle Financial Tower was completed in 1998. Designed as a premium office space for the city's growing financial sector. The upper floors house Meridian Capital Management, a hedge fund that manages billions in assets for wealthy clients. These are high-pressure offices where people work 80-hour weeks and fortunes are made or lost based on split-second decisions. I started working there in 2021, hired through a staffing agency that specialized in commercial cleaning services. The pay was excellent, partly because of the building's security requirements, and partly because few people wanted to work alone in a 42-story tower during the overnight hours. The executive floors were especially demanding, requiring meticulous attention to detail and absolute discretion regarding any confidential information I might encounter. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 8 floors of offices, conference rooms, and executive suites. The work is systematic. Empty trash, vacuum carpets, clean windows, sanitize surfaces, restock supplies. Each floor takes about an hour to complete properly, though the 38th floor always seemed to require more time than the others. The 38th floor houses Meridian's quantitative trading department, where analysts use complex mathematical models to predict market movements. It's a specialized field that requires advanced degrees in mathematics, computer science, and finance. The people who work there are brilliant, obsessive, and completely dedicated to their research. I noticed irregularities on the 38th floor during my second month on the job. Small things at first, computers that would be running when I arrived, displaying financial data and complex calculations. I'd shut them down as part of my routine, following the building's energy conservation policies. But the next night, those same computers would be active again, running the same programs with updated data. The IT department explained that some trading systems run continuously, processing market data from global exchanges that operate 24 hours a day. It made sense that these computers would restart automatically, maintaining the constant flow of financial information that drives modern trading. But what didn't make sense was the progression of the work. Each night, I'd find new calculations on the whiteboards, fresh printouts arranged on desks, coffee cups that were still warm despite the offices being empty since 7 p.m. Someone was clearly working on the 38th floor during my shift, but I never saw anyone enter or leave the building. Security at Pinnacle Financial Tower is extensive. Keycard access to all floors, security cameras in every hallway, electronic logs of everyone who enters or exits the building. I checked with the overnight security guard, asking if anyone had accessed the 38th floor during my shift. Nobody's been up there since the markets closed, he assured me. System shows the last departure at 7:23 p.m. Wouldn't be able to miss anyone coming or going. Yet the evidence of ongoing work was undeniable. Research papers covered in handwritten notes, financial models with fresh calculations, computers running simulations that took hours to complete. Someone with advanced expertise was continuing the trading department's work throughout the night. I started paying closer attention to the specific work being done. The calculations focused on cryptocurrency markets, particularly arbitrage opportunities between different global exchanges. It was sophisticated analysis, the kind of work that required deep understanding of international finance and real-time market data. One name appeared consistently on the research materials: Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Senior Quantitative Analyst. Her office was in the northeast corner of the 38th floor, a large space filled with multiple monitors, advanced computer equipment, and whiteboards covered in complex mathematical formulas. According to the nameplate on her door, Dr. Walsh had been with Meridian Capital Management since 2018. The work in Dr. Walsh's office was always the most current. Fresh calculations that built on the previous night's research, new trading models that incorporated the latest market data, printouts of research papers published within the past 24 hours. It was clear that whoever was working there had access to real-time information and was making significant progress on highly sophisticated financial analysis. I decided to research Dr. Jennifer Walsh, curious about the analyst whose work continued around the clock. The Meridian Capital website listed her credentials: PhD in Applied Mathematics from MIT, former researcher at Goldman Sachs, published author on quantitative trading strategies. Impressive qualifications for someone doing groundbreaking work in cryptocurrency arbitrage. But when I searched for more recent information about Dr. Walsh, I found something troubling. An obituary in the Seattle Times, dated September 15th, 2022. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, age 34, had died in a car accident while driving home from Pinnacle Financial Tower after working late on a crucial trading model. The article mentioned her dedication to her research and her potential to revolutionize cryptocurrency trading. Dr. Walsh had been dead for over a year, yet her office showed clear evidence of ongoing work. Fresh calculations, current market data, research that incorporated financial developments from the past week. Someone was continuing her research with access to her computer systems and deep knowledge of her analytical methods. I brought this information to building management, explaining the situation as diplomatically as possible. The property manager, Mrs. Harrison, listened with growing concern. Dr. Walsh's office has been sealed since the accident, she said. Meridian Capital requested that her research materials be preserved pending the completion of her final project. Nobody should have access to that space. But someone is clearly working there, I insisted. Fresh calculations, updated data, work that's continuing her research on cryptocurrency arbitrage. Mrs. Harrison checked the building's security records. According to the electronic logs, Dr. Walsh's office hadn't been accessed since September 2022. Her key card had been deactivated after the accident, and no other employee had been granted access to her workspace. "This is impossible," Mrs. Harrison said. "The office is electronically sealed. No one can enter without triggering security alerts." That night, I decided to observe Dr. Walsh's office more carefully. Instead of my usual routine, I positioned myself quietly in the break area across the hall, where I could watch her office door without being obvious about it. At 11:47 p.m., I heard the distinctive sound of computer keyboards typing rapidly, the rhythmic clicking of someone entering complex data. The sound was coming from Dr. Walsh's office, clearly audible even through the closed door. I could also see the glow of multiple computer monitors, illuminating the frosted glass windows that faced the hallway. I approached the office door and listened carefully. The typing continued, accompanied by the occasional sound of papers rustling and what sounded like someone working with financial calculators. Someone was definitely working inside Dr. Walsh's sealed office, someone with extensive knowledge of her research methods. I tried the door handle. Locked, as expected. But the electronic keypad next to the door was active. displaying the ready status that indicated the system was operational. On impulse, I knocked softly on the door. The typing stopped immediately. Several seconds of silence, then a voice from inside the office. Female, professional, with the kind of focused intensity that comes from working on complex problems. "David? Is that you?" Asterisk, asterisk. The voice knew my name, though I'd never introduced myself to anyone on the 38th floor. Most of the trading department employees left before my shift began, and I'd never had occasion to interact with them directly. "Yes, it's David. I'm the night maintenance worker." "Perfect timing," the voice replied. "I could use fresh coffee if you have a moment. Working on something important." I stood in that hallway, staring at the locked door of an office that belonged to a woman who'd been dead for over a year. Someone inside was requesting coffee, speaking with the casual familiarity of a colleague. "Ma'am, I'm not sure who you are, but Dr. Walsh's office has been sealed since her accident. You shouldn't be in there." "Sealed?" The voice sounded genuinely confused. "I don't understand. I've been working here every night since the project deadline was moved up. Still trying to complete the cryptocurrency arbitrage model before the presentation." Presentation. According to the obituary, Dr. Walsh had been working late on a crucial presentation when she died in the car accident. She'd been rushing to complete a groundbreaking analysis of cryptocurrency markets, research that could have generated millions in trading profits. "Dr. Walsh," I said carefully, "what's the date today?" "September 14th, 2022, came the immediate reply. "Why?" "The presentation is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Still have hours of work to finish." September 14th, 2022, the day before Dr. Walsh's accident. From her perspective inside that office, she was still working on the project that had kept her late on her final night. She was still trying to meet the deadline that had sent her driving home through rain-slick streets in the early morning hours. "Dr. Walsh, it's actually December 2023. You've been working on this project for over a year." Long silence from inside the office. When the voice returned, it carried a different quality, less certain but still professionally focused. "That's not possible. The presentation is tomorrow. Mr. Meridian is expecting the final analysis by 9 a.m. I realized that Dr. Walsh was trapped in the final night of her life, endlessly working toward a deadline she would never meet, trying to complete research that had been interrupted by her death. She was continuing her work from inside the sealed office, unaware that time had passed or that her project had become irrelevant. "Dr. Walsh, what happens after you finish the presentation?" "After?" Another pause. "I suppose I'll go home. Get some sleep. Maybe take a vacation. This project has consumed my life for months." She was planning for a future that would never come, working toward a deadline that had passed 15 months ago. Dr. Walsh was completing her research in a temporal loop, forever trapped in the hours before her accident. I made a decision that probably violated multiple building policies. Using my master key, I unlocked the supply closet and retrieved a coffee service cart, the kind used for executive meetings. I prepared fresh coffee, arranged cups and supplies, and wheeled the cart to Dr. Walsh's office. "Dr. Walsh, I have coffee for you. Could you unlock the door?" I heard movement inside the office, footsteps approaching the door. The electronic lock clicked, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her early 30s with short brown hair, wearing a business suit that looked like it had been pressed that morning. She appeared completely solid, absolutely real, not ghostly or translucent in any way. "Thank you so much," Dr. Walsh said, stepping aside to let me enter with the coffee cart. "You're a lifesaver. Been working since yesterday morning and haven't had decent coffee in hours." Inside her office, I could see the evidence of intensive work. Multiple computer monitors displayed complex financial models, whiteboards covered with mathematical formulas, stacks of research papers covered in handwritten notes. It was the workspace of someone making significant, Intellectual breakthroughs under extreme time pressure. Dr. Walsh poured coffee with the efficiency of someone who'd been surviving on caffeine for days. Almost finished with the arbitrage model, she explained. Found patterns in the cryptocurrency markets that could generate consistent profits. Mr. Meridian will be very pleased. She showed me her computer screens, explaining the sophisticated analysis she'd developed. The work was genuinely groundbreaking, identifying opportunities for risk-free profits in the volatile cryptocurrency markets. It was the kind of research that could have made Meridian Capital Management billions of dollars. Dr. Walsh, I said carefully, how long have you been working on this project? 18 months of development, but the final push has been the last 72 hours. Haven't left the building since Tuesday. According to the obituary, Dr. Walsh had been at Pinnacle Financial Tower for 3 consecutive days before her accident, working around the clock to meet her deadline. She'd been living in her office, surviving on coffee and determination, pushing herself to complete research that would define her career. What time do you usually go home? When the work is finished, Dr. Walsh replied without looking away from her computer. This project is too important to abandon because of fatigue. That was her pattern. Dr. Walsh never went home until her work was complete, which meant she never went home at all. She was trapped in an endless cycle of research and analysis, forever approaching but never reaching the completion of her final project. I spent an hour in Dr. Walsh's office, watching her work and trying to understand the situation. She was brilliant, focused, completely dedicated to her research. She was also completely unaware that her dedication had cost her life, and that her work continued in a building where she was officially dead as my shift neared its end. I realized I had to leave Dr. Walsh to her research. She was making genuine progress on her analysis, working with updated market data and incorporating recent developments in cryptocurrency trading. Her work was current and relevant, even though she'd been dead for 15 months. Dr. Walsh, I have to finish my cleaning rounds. Will you be all right? Of course, she said, already turning back to her computer. Thank you for the coffee. See you tomorrow night. I left her office and completed my rounds on the other floors. When I returned to check on the 38th floor before leaving, Dr. Walsh's office was dark and quiet. The electronic lock showed secure status, and there was no evidence of the intensive work I'd witnessed hours earlier. I've been bringing coffee to Dr. Walsh every night since then. She's always working on the same project, always approaching the same deadline, always planning to go home after completing her research. She never remembers our previous conversations, but she's consistently grateful for the coffee and happy to explain her breakthrough analysis. Last month, I decided to research the practical value of Dr. Walsh's work, using the mathematical formulas I'd observed on her whiteboards. I created a simple cryptocurrency trading algorithm and tested it with small amounts of my personal savings. The algorithm works perfectly. Dr. Walsh's research identifies genuine arbitrage, opportunities that generate consistent profits. In 30 days of testing, I've made more money than my annual salary at Pinnacle Financial Tower. Her work isn't just academically brilliant. It's practically revolutionary. I've tried to convince Dr. Walsh to submit her research, to share her breakthroughs with the financial community. But she's always focused on her immediate deadline, always worried about her presentation the next morning. She can't see beyond the temporal loop that keeps her working endlessly on a project that will never be officially completed. Building management has asked me to report any irregularities on the 38th floor, but I haven't mentioned my conversations with Dr. Walsh. Her research is too valuable to interrupt, and her work isn't harming anyone. She's continuing her life's work under the only circumstances available to her, trapped by dedication that transcends death. Last week, Meridian Capital Management announced plans to relocate to a newer building in the financial district. Pinnacle Financial Tower will be renovated for mixed-use occupancy, which means the trading department's offices will be demolished. I don't know what will happen to Dr. Walsh when her office is destroyed. Will she finally be able to move beyond her endless deadline? Will her research be lost when the building is renovated? Or will she continue working in whatever space replaces her current office? I'm telling this story because Dr. Walsh's work deserves to be recognized. She spent over a year developing analysis that could revolutionize cryptocurrency trading, working alone in a sealed office while the financial world moves forward without her contributions. Every night, as I bring coffee to a brilliant analyst who died pursuing perfection, I'm reminded that some people are so dedicated to their work that death becomes just another obstacle to overcome. Dr. Walsh continues her research not because she has to, but because excellence demands completion regardless of circumstances. Her cryptocurrency arbitrage model will probably die with her when the building is renovated. Months of brilliant analysis will be lost because the deadline she's chasing will never arrive. But for now, she continues working, creating genuine value in a world that doesn't know she's still contributing to it. That's what real dedication looks like. Working toward excellence even when the world has moved on without you. Story 4. The facility keeper Michael Torres. And I work as a facilities maintenance supervisor at Westfield Research Institute, a government-funded laboratory complex in Virginia that specializes in advanced materials research and classified defense projects. For 6 years, I've been responsible for maintaining the building's infrastructure, VAC systems, electrical networks, security protocols, and the specialized equipment that supports sensitive research operations. What I discovered in Laboratory 7 changed my understanding of what happens when research continues beyond the official end of a project. Some experiments never truly conclude, and some scientists refuse to abandon their work even when funding is terminated and access is revoked. Westfield Research Institute was established in 1987 as a joint venture between the Department of Defense and several major universities. The facility houses 12 specialized laboratories where scientists work on projects ranging from advanced metallurgy to quantum computing. The work is highly classified, requiring extensive security clearances and strict adherence to protocols designed to protect both research integrity and national security. I started working at Westfield in 2018, hired because of my background in industrial maintenance and my existing security clearance from previous work with defense contractors. The job paid well and offered excellent benefits, partly because qualified personnel with appropriate clearances were difficult to find, and partly because the work could be demanding and stressful. My responsibilities included monitoring the building's critical systems, performing preventive maintenance on research equipment, and ensuring that environmental conditions remained within the strict parameters required for sensitive experiments. Each laboratory had specific requirements for temperature, humidity, air pressure, and electromagnetic isolation. Laboratory 7 was always the most challenging to maintain. The space housed Dr. Elena Vasquez's research into room temperature superconductors, work that required extremely precise environmental control and specialized equipment that operated at the limits of current technology. Dr. Vasquez was a brilliant physicist who'd been at Westfield since the facility opened, working on projects that could revolutionize energy transmission and storage. I noticed irregularities in Laboratory 7 during my first month on the job. The environmental control systems would register unexpected fluctuations, temperature variations that shouldn't occur with properly functioning equipment, electromagnetic readings that suggested active experiments during periods when the laboratory was officially empty. Initially, I assumed these anomalies indicated equipment malfunctions. Research-grade environmental controls are extremely sensitive, and minor calibration errors can produce significant readings. I performed routine maintenance on all the systems, replacing sensors, updating calibration parameters, and documenting everything according to Westfield's strict maintenance protocols. But the irregularities persisted. More troubling, they followed patterns that suggested active experimentation rather than random equipment failures. Temperature spikes that occurred in regular intervals. Electromagnetic pulses that matched the signature of superconductor testing. Power consumption profiles that indicated someone was running sophisticated experiments. Checked with the laboratory scheduling office to see if Dr. Vasquez had reserved additional research time. According to their records, Laboratory 7 had been officially inactive since May 2018, when Dr. Vasquez's project had been terminated due to budget cuts and shifted research priorities. Dr. Vasquez hasn't had access to Laboratory 7 since her project ended, explained Ms. Chun, the administrative coordinator responsible for research scheduling. Her security clearance was transferred to other projects, and the laboratory has been sealed pending reassignment to a new research team. Sealed laboratories at Westfield are serious business. When a project ends, all research materials are secured, equipment is powered down, and electronic access is revoked. The laboratory becomes a controlled environment where nothing should be happening without explicit authorization from facility management. Yet, Laboratory 7 showed clear evidence of ongoing activity. Not just environmental fluctuations, but progression in the work itself. Research notes appeared on whiteboards that should have been cleaned months earlier. Experimental equipment was arranged in configurations that didn't match the shutdown. Procedures I'd witnessed when Dr. Vasquez's project ended. I decided to investigate more directly. Late one evening, after completing my routine maintenance rounds, I used my master access card to enter Laboratory 7. The space was officially empty, all equipment powered down. Research materials secured in locked cabinets, but the laboratory didn't feel empty. The air carried the distinctive ozone smell that accompanies high-voltage electrical work, and I could hear the faint humming of equipment that should have been inactive. More unsettling, the main experiment table was set up with apparatus I didn't recognize. Devices that appeared more advanced than anything I'd seen during Dr. Vasquez's official project. I approached the experiment table carefully. The equipment was running, displaying data on digital readouts that showed temperature, magnetic field strength, and electrical resistance measurements. Someone had been conducting sophisticated superconductor research using apparatus that hadn't been in Laboratory 7 when the project ended. That's when I heard footsteps in the laboratory's preparation room, the adjacent space where Dr. Vasquez had stored her research materials and prepared experimental samples. Someone was moving around in there, handling equipment with the practiced efficiency of someone intimately familiar with the workspace. Dr. Vasquez? I called out, though I knew her access had been revoked months earlier. Michael? Is that you? Came the reply, Dr. Vasquez's voice clearly recognizable despite being muffled by the preparation room door. Perfect timing. I could use assistance moving some equipment. I stood in that laboratory, listening to the voice of a scientist whose project had been officially terminated and whose access to the facility had been revoked. Dr. Vasquez was requesting help with research that wasn't supposed to be happening in a laboratory that should have been empty. Dr. Vasquez, your project was ended in May. You don't have access to Laboratory 7 anymore. Ended? Dr. Vasquez's voice carried genuine confusion. The superconductor research is just reaching a breakthrough phase. We're weeks away from demonstrating room temperature superconductivity with practical applications. Why would they end the project now? Room temperature superconductivity. Dr. Vasquez's original project had been pursuing that exact goal. Research that could revolutionize everything from power transmission to magnetic levitation. But the work had been terminated when early experiments failed to produce the dramatic results that funding agencies expected. Dr. Vasquez, the funding was cut. The project was reassigned to theoretical research rather than experimental work. That's impossible, Dr. Vasquez replied. I'm generating consistent superconductivity at 22 degrees Celsius. The applications are extraordinary. Military communications, energy storage, transportation systems. This research will change everything. 22 degrees Celsius. Room temperature superconductivity had been the holy grail of physics for decades, pursued by researchers around the world without success. If Dr. Vasquez had actually achieved that breakthrough, it would represent one of the most significant scientific discoveries in human history. I approached the preparation room door, which was closed but not locked. Inside, I could hear Dr. Vasquez working with equipment, the sounds of someone conducting sophisticated experiments with expensive research apparatus. Dr. Vasquez, may I see your work? Of course, she replied. Always happy to demonstrate the applications. Come in. I opened the preparation room door and found Dr. Vasquez exactly as I remembered her from the final weeks of her official project. A woman in her 50s with gray hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a laboratory coat over professional attire. She was working with apparatus I'd never seen before. Devices that appeared decades ahead of anything available at Westfield. Look at this, Dr. Vasquez said, indicating a small cylindrical object suspended in a magnetic field. Superconducting at room temperature with zero electrical resistance. Perfect magnetic levitation. Unlimited current carrying capacity. She demonstrated the properties of her material, showing how it maintained superconductivity without the cooling systems that traditional superconductors required. The applications were immediately obvious. Power lines that could transmit electricity without energy loss. Magnetic levitation systems that operated without enormous refrigeration costs. Energy storage devices with unlimited capacity. This is incredible work, I said. Though part of me wondered why such a breakthrough hadn't been announced to the scientific community. It's taken 4 years to achieve stable results. Dr. Vasquez explained. The key was understanding how crystal lattice structure interacts with quantum coherence at higher temperatures. Most researchers approach the problem from the wrong direction. 4 years. Dr. Vasquez's official project had lasted only 3 years before being terminated. She was claiming to have continued her research for an additional year beyond the end of her funding, working in a laboratory to which she officially had no access. Dr. Vasquez, how have you been continuing this work without official support? Official support? She looked puzzled. Dr. Harrison approved my research proposal just last month. Full funding for another 3 years, plus budget increases for advanced equipment. Dr. Harrison had been the research director at Westfield until his retirement in 2016. 2 years before I started working there. He couldn't have approved any recent research proposals, yet Dr. Vasquez was clearly continuing her work under the impression that she had current authorization. Dr. Vasquez, what's today's date? March 15th, 2018, she replied without hesitation. Why? March 2018, 2 months before her project was officially terminated. From Dr. Vasquez's perspective, she was still in the middle of active research with full funding and institutional support. She was unaware that her work had been discontinued and that she'd been continuing her experiments for over 6 months beyond the official end of her project. Dr. Vasquez, it's actually November 2018. Your project was terminated in May. She stared at me for several seconds, processing information that clearly contradicted her understanding of current events. That's not possible. I'm making breakthrough discoveries. The applications for room temperature superconductivity are revolutionary. I realized that Dr. Vasquez was trapped in the final months of her project, continuously working toward discoveries that had already been deemed unworthy of continued funding. She was making genuine scientific breakthroughs in a temporal loop that kept her forever approaching, but never reaching the official recognition her work deserved. Dr. Vasquez, would you be willing to document your discoveries? Create a comprehensive report that could be submitted for peer review? Absolutely, she said with enthusiasm. Dr. Harrison has requested a full progress report by the end of the month. I've been documenting everything: experimental procedures, material specifications, theoretical foundations. I spent 3 hours in Laboratory 7 that night, watching Dr. Vasquez demonstrate superconductivity effects that shouldn't have been possible with available technology. Her work was genuinely revolutionary, representing advances that could transform multiple industries and scientific fields. But when I returned the next night, Dr. Vasquez had no memory of our previous conversation. She was working on the same experiments, approaching the same discoveries, planning to submit the same progress report to Dr. Harrison. She was trapped in a cycle of breakthrough, research that would never receive official recognition. I began visiting Laboratory 7 regularly, documenting Dr. Vasquez's work and trying to understand how she'd achieved room temperature superconductivity. Her research was methodical and reproducible, based on solid theoretical foundations and innovative experimental techniques. Using her notes and procedures, I was able to replicate some of her simpler demonstrations in my home workshop. The materials she developed showed genuine superconducting properties at room temperature, exactly as she'd claimed. Her work wasn't theoretical. It was practical physics that could be implemented immediately. Last month, I submitted an anonymous report to the Department of Energy describing Dr. Vasquez's superconductivity discoveries. I included detailed experimental procedures, material specifications, and theoretical explanations based on months of observing her work. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within a week, Westfield received visits from government scientists, university researchers, and representatives from major technology companies. They wanted to examine the superconductivity research that had been described in my report, but when they arrived at Laboratory 7, they found it exactly as it should have been: empty, equipment powered down. No evidence of ongoing research. Dr. Vasquez's work exists only during the overnight hours when I'm present to observe it. The scientific community has dismissed my report as elaborate hoax or misunderstood phenomena. They can't replicate Dr. Vasquez's results because they're trying to conduct research during normal business hours, when her work doesn't exist in our temporal reality. I'm telling this story because Dr. Vasquez's discoveries deserve recognition. She spent over a year developing practical room temperature superconductivity, working alone in a sealed laboratory, while the scientific world searches unsuccessfully for the same breakthroughs. Every night, she continues her research, approaching discoveries that could revolutionize technology and energy systems. But her work exists outside official time, in the temporal loop of a terminated project where funding cuts can't prevent scientific progress. Next month, Westfield Research Institute will be reorganized under new management. Laboratory 7 will be converted to quantum computing research, and Dr. Vasquez's superconductor equipment will be removed and replaced. I don't know what will happen to her research when the laboratory is converted. Will she continue working in whatever space replaces her current setup? Will her discoveries finally break free from the temporal constraints that keep them hidden? Or will room temperature superconductivity remain forever just beyond official reach? For now, Dr. Vasquez continues her work, creating revolutionary science in a laboratory that officially doesn't exist, funded by grants that were never approved, working toward recognition that will never come. That's what real scientific dedication looks like. Pursuing breakthrough discoveries even when the world has decided your research isn't worth supporting. Story 5. The Custodial Guardian. My name is Patricia Williams. and I work as head custodian at St. Mary's Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, a 200-bed facility that specializes in pediatric care for critically ill children. For 12 years, I've been responsible for maintaining the cleanliness and safety of an environment where the smallest patients fight the biggest battles of their lives. What I discovered on the 5th floor's oncology ward changed my understanding of what healing really means. Some caregivers never stop caring, and some protection continues even after death, provided by those who refuse to abandon the children who need them most. St. Mary's Children's Hospital was founded in 1952 by the Sisters of Mercy, designed specifically to provide compassionate care for children facing serious medical conditions. The 5th floor houses the pediatric oncology ward, where young patients receive treatment for various forms of cancer. It's simultaneously the most hopeful and most heartbreaking place in the hospital, where medical miracles happen alongside devastating losses. I started working at St. Mary's in 2012. Drawn by the hospital's reputation for exceptional patient care and its commitment to creating a healing environment for children and families facing unimaginable challenges. The work was emotionally demanding but deeply meaningful, contributing to an institution that gave hope to families when they needed it most. My responsibilities included supervising a team of custodial staff, maintaining infection control protocols, and ensuring that every area of the hospital met the stringent cleanliness standards required for pediatric care. Children with compromised immune systems are extremely vulnerable to infections, making our work literally a matter of life and death. The 5th floor was always my personal priority. The oncology ward required the most careful attention to detail, the most sophisticated cleaning protocols, and the most emotional resilience from staff members who witnessed both triumph and tragedy on a daily basis. I took pride in maintaining an environment where families could focus on healing rather than worrying about safety. Started noticing unusual activity on the 5th floor during my second year at St. Mary's. Small things initially. Toys that would be arranged differently between my evening rounds and morning inspections. Children's rooms that appeared to have been cleaned more thoroughly than my staff had time to accomplish. Medical equipment that seemed to operate more smoothly than maintenance schedules would suggest. The 5th floor had a guardian angel, or so the nursing staff claimed. They spoke about unexplained improvements in patient conditions, medical equipment that would mysteriously resolve technical problems, and a general sense that the ward was protected by something beyond normal hospital operations. I was skeptical of supernatural explanations until I started observing patterns in the unusual incidents. They weren't random occurrences. They were systematic interventions that consistently improved patient care and family comfort. Someone with extensive knowledge of pediatric nursing was working on the 5th floor during overnight hours. Nurse Sarah Martinez had worked the night shift in pediatric oncology for 15 years. She was a legend among the medical staff, known for her intuitive understanding of children's needs and her ability to provide comfort during the most difficult moments of treatment. Parents requested Sarah specifically, and children brightened when she entered their rooms. Sarah's dedication to her patients was absolute. She worked double shifts when understaffing threatened patient care, spent her own money on toys and comfort items for children whose families couldn't afford them, and often stayed late to provide emotional support to families facing devastating diagnoses. On March 23, 2020, Sarah collapsed at the nurse's station during her shift, the victim of a massive heart attack brought on by years of overwork and stress. Despite immediate medical intervention, she was pronounced dead at 3:47 a.m. in the same hospital, where she devoted her career to saving children's lives. The 5th floor was never quite the same after Sarah's death. Patient care remained excellent, but something essential had been lost. The intuitive interventions that had made the ward special seemed to diminish. And both staff and families noticed the absence of Sarah's extraordinary presence. But within a month of her death, I started noticing new patterns in the overnight activity. Medical equipment that performed better than expected. Patient rooms that showed signs of additional attention beyond routine care. And a gradual improvement in overall ward conditions that couldn't be explained by staffing changes or new protocols. One night in late April, I was conducting my final inspection round when I heard activity in room 517. A private room where 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez was receiving treatment for leukemia. Emma was in the middle of an intensive chemotherapy cycle, and her condition had been deteriorating despite aggressive treatment. I could hear someone moving around in Emma's room, checking equipment and speaking in the gentle, reassuring tone that experienced pediatric nurses use with frightened children. The voice was familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. I approached room 517, quietly, and looked through the partially open door. A woman in scrubs was adjusting Emma's 4 lines, checking her vital signs, and speaking softly to the sleeping child. The woman worked with the practiced efficiency of someone with extensive pediatric experience. "Emma, sweetheart, your IV was getting a little tangled. Let me fix that for you so you'll be more comfortable." The voice was Sarah Martinez's. I was watching Sarah work with a patient, demonstrating the same gentle competence that had made her beloved by families throughout the oncology ward. But Sarah had died 4 weeks earlier, and no unauthorized personnel should have access to patient rooms. During overnight hours, Sarah noticed my presence and turned toward the door, offering the warm smile that had comforted hundreds of families during their darkest moments. She appeared completely solid, real, wearing the same scrubs she'd favored during her years at St. Mary's. "Patricia, good to see you," Sarah said, as if our encounter was perfectly normal. Emma was having some discomfort with her 4 placement. Should be feeling better now. I stood in that doorway, looking at a nurse who died a month earlier, watching her provide expert patient care in a hospital room where she officially had no access. Sarah was continuing her work, caring for children who needed her expertise regardless of her mortality status. "Sarah, you died in March. How are you here?" Sarah's expression showed momentary confusion, followed by the kind of determined focus that had characterized her approach to patient care. "I don't understand what you mean, but these children need help. Emma's white blood cell count is dropping, and her parents are terrified. Someone has to provide proper care." Proper care. Sarah had always been obsessive about providing the highest quality nursing care, working extra hours and taking personal responsibility for every child on the ward. Death apparently hadn't changed her commitment to pediatric patients. "Sarah, do you remember your heart attack?" ***, heart attack. Sarah paused, considering the question. "I've been feeling tired lately, working a lot of extra shifts. Maybe I should see a doctor when I have time." She didn't remember dying. From Sarah's perspective, she was continuing her regular nursing duties, caring for patients who needed her skills. She was unaware that her official employment had ended and that her access to the hospital should have been terminated. I decided not to challenge Sarah's understanding of her situation. She was providing exceptional care to children who desperately needed it, working with knowledge and compassion that couldn't be replaced by administrative protocols. "What can I do to help?" I asked. Sarah brightened at the offer. "Emma's room needs extra attention to infection control. Her immune system is severely compromised by the chemotherapy. Also, her parents have been sleeping in that uncomfortable chair for 3 days. Maybe we could arrange better accommodations." I spent an hour that night working alongside Sarah, learning about the specific needs of pediatric oncology patients from someone with 15 years of specialized experience. She taught me cleaning techniques I'd never encountered, infection control protocols that went far beyond standard hospital procedures, and ways to arrange patient rooms that maximized both safety and comfort. Sarah's knowledge was extraordinary. She understood each child's medical condition, treatment plan, and family dynamics. She could predict which patients would have difficult nights and which families needed extra emotional support. Her insights were based on years of experience combined with an intuitive understanding of children's needs. I began working with Sarah every night, following her guidance to improve care conditions throughout the 5th floor. Under her instruction, I learned to maintain patient rooms at standards that exceeded hospital requirements, creating environments that actively supported healing rather than simply meeting minimum safety protocols. The results were remarkable. Infection rates on the 5th floor dropped significantly. Patient comfort scores improved. Families reported feeling more confident about the quality of care their children received. The improvements were attributed to enhanced custodial procedures, though the real credit belonged to Sarah's continued nursing expertise. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the head of pediatric oncology, started commenting on the improvements in ward conditions. "Whatever you're doing differently, Patricia, keep it up. The 5th floor hasn't looked this good since Sarah was alive." She was more accurate than she realized. The 5th floor looked better because Sarah was still providing nursing care, working through me to maintain the standards of patient care that had defined her career. Last month, I decided to research the impact of Sarah's continued work. I compared patient outcomes on the 5th floor before and after her death, looking for measurable improvements in the quality of care. The statistics were compelling. Since Sarah's death, the oncology ward had shown significant improvements in multiple metrics: reduced infection rates, shorter average length of stay, improved patient satisfaction scores, and better treatment outcomes. The ward was performing better than it had during Sarah's lifetime. I shared these findings with Dr. Harper, explaining that enhanced custodial procedures had contributed to the improvements. She was impressed by the data, but curious about the specific changes I'd implemented. "What exactly are you doing differently, Patricia?" I couldn't explain that I was following guidance from a deceased nurse who continued working on the ward every night. Instead, I described the enhanced infection control protocols and specialized cleaning techniques I'd learned from Sarah without mentioning their source. "These procedures are remarkably sophisticated," Dr. Harper observed. "They demonstrate understanding of pediatric nursing that goes beyond typical custodial training." She was right. The procedures were based on 15 years of nursing experience, taught to me by someone who refused to abandon her patients even after death. Sarah was continuing her career through my work, ensuring that children received the highest possible standard of care. 3 weeks ago, the hospital administration announced plans to renovate the 5th floor, upgrading patient rooms and installing advanced medical equipment. The renovation will require temporarily relocating all oncology patients to other facilities. While construction is completed, I'm concerned about what will happen to Sarah's work when the ward is renovated. Will she continue providing care in the temporary locations? Will her nursing expertise transfer to the renovated facility? Or will the construction interrupt her ability to care for the children who need her? I've tried to discuss the situation with Sarah, but she remains focused on immediate patient needs rather than future concerns. She's caring for children who are currently on the ward, providing nursing expertise that can't be replicated by administrative planning. Last night, I asked Sarah what would happen if she couldn't continue working on the 5th floor. "These children will always need proper care," she replied. "Someone has to ensure they receive the nursing attention they deserve. Whether that's me or someone else doesn't matter. What matters is that the work continues." Someone else. Sarah was suggesting that her nursing expertise could be transferred to other caregivers, that her knowledge and dedication could continue through people who shared her commitment to pediatric patients. I'm telling this story because Sarah's work deserves recognition. For over a year, she's continued providing expert nursing care to children with cancer. working through enhanced custodial procedures to maintain standards that exceed hospital requirements. Every night, she demonstrates what true dedication to patient care looks like, continuing to serve children who need help regardless of employment status, mortality, or administrative barriers. When the 5th floor is renovated, I'll carry Sarah's knowledge to the new facility. Her nursing expertise will continue through enhanced procedures that prioritize patient safety and family comfort. Above all other considerations, the children of St. Mary's Children's Hospital will always receive exceptional care because Sarah Martinez refuses to abandon them. That's what real nursing means, caring for patients who need you, no matter what circumstances might suggest it's time to stop.